righty. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here today. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderators who will engage in the forum with our great gubernatorial candidates. My name is Tahirah Amatul-Wadud. I'm an attorney out in Springfield, and I'm running for Congress in the 1st District. And it's my pleasure to be sitting on this end of the table. Introducing you to these rock stars here in Western Massachusetts. So someone teased me and said that if I'm reading bios from a phone, it means that I'm younger than 40. So let's go. So to my immediate left, we have Helen Moon. Helen is a critical care registered nurse at Fairview Hospital in Great Barrington. She's been a Pittsfield resident since she moved here from Long Meadow back in 2009. She moved to the Berkshires to attend nursing school right here at Berkshire Community College, and she continued with her nursing degree, completing the Bachelor's of Nursing at Elms College, my alma mater, in 2015. And since then, she has formed a personal and professional community in the Berkshires. Recently, Moon was recognized with professional advancement at Fairview Hospital because of her leadership in education, in educating the South County community with heart disease about heart disease at an annual Healthy Heart Night event held in Berkshire South Regional Community Center. After moving to the Berkshires, she spent her personal and professional life advocating for the youth and underserved communities. And while studying at American Studies with concentration in Asian Studies at the Civil Rights Movement at the University of Mass in Boston. Moon moved into the intentional housing in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Oh, the print is pretty tiny, so do you have it pulled up there?
No, I don't.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right. She has a love of people and children from all walks of life, and that has led her to travel abroad. She has spent summers in Oaxaca, Mexico, teaching English in youth summer camps, and other summers she's gone to Cairo, Egypt, where she's participated in women's empowerment groups. Let's see, you're the city councilor for Ward 1 here in Pittsfield, and I give you Helen Moon. All right, we have Paul Mark. Paul was first elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in November 2010. Representative Mark's district encompasses 10 communities in Berkshire and Franklin counties, 16 communities in Berkshire and Franklin counties, the largest geographical representative district in the Commonwealth. Paul earned an associate's degree in telecommunications from Springfield Technical Community College and a bachelor's degree in economics from Southern New Hampshire University. Paul graduated from Suffolk Law in 2009 and Northeastern in 2010. His doctoral dissertation is entitled Predicting Labor Law Reform. He took and passed the Massachusetts bar exam in July 2009. Paul currently serves as the chair of the House Committee on Redistricting and the chair of the House Labor Caucus. I give you Paul Mark. I'm doing it from my phone. And next we have Francia Wisnewski, is a Democratic candidate for state rep in the 1st Franklin District here in Massachusetts. Francia currently serves as the chair of the Hampshire Franklin Commission on the Status of Women and is a member of the Montague Town Meeting and Montague Democratic Committee. She also serves on the boards of the Shea Theater and Leadership in Pioneer Valley. Before moving to Montague, she served 2 terms on the Greenfield School Committee, including a term as vice chair, and served as a state Democratic delegate. She is a graduate of the Emerge Massachusetts program. As senior program manager at Raising a Reader in Massachusetts, Francia supports preparing children for school success through early reading and parental education. She holds a master's degree in education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I give you Francia Wisnewski.
Thank you very much, Tahirah, for those wonderful introductions. And thank you to our two candidates, Bob Massie and Jay Gonzalez, for coming all the way out to Pittsfield. We're about 3 minutes from New York State, but this is how far the state actually goes. It's amazing, huh? We appreciate you being here. The format, as we've been told, is going to be 3 minutes to respond to the questions. You both have a chance to respond to the same question. If we see there's discussion going, if you want to rebuttal, something like that, please let us know, and we'll allow for that as necessary. And I believe you'll each have 3 minutes to offer an open statement and 3 minutes to offer a closing statement. And we've been asked to make sure we end promptly at 5:30. So without further ado, you two can arm wrestle, whichever one wants to go first. Take it away.
Well, then I'll take it away. Thank you to our esteemed panel, and I want to thank all of you for choosing to be here on a beautiful Memorial Day weekend day. It says something about all of you, and one of the gentlemen, is it Hugh? Hugh had said citizenship is an important responsibility, or something to that effect. So you're all exercising that important responsibility right now, and thank you. I'm Jay Gonzalez. I'm running for governor because I care about people, and I want to make a difference in people's lives. With Trump taking us backwards every single day, it is more important than ever that we're leading right here in Massachusetts, and that's not happening right now. Not under Charlie Baker. He's a status quo, wait-and-see governor, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough for your whole approach to the job to be, where are we, what do we have, and what's the best we can do. We need a governor who's going to see the way the world should be and take us to that place. Let's aim high. Let's aim high. As your governor, I'll ensure we have a living wage, paid family leave, affordable housing, debt-free college. I will work to ensure that every child and family has access to a great, high-quality childcare and preschool. A transportation system across this entire state, yes, even 3 minutes from the New York border, that people can actually depend on to get to work on time. A single-payer healthcare system that's simpler, cheaper, and does a better job keeping people healthy. This is a former health insurance CEO telling you we need to get rid of health insurance companies. And as the only one in the Democratic primary race who's worked in the healthcare industry, I believe I'm best positioned to get this done, and I will get it done. I'll take on other big challenges we face, like climate change and the opioid epidemic and our broken criminal justice system. And most important, I will stand up for every single person in this state. I'm offering an ambitious, progressive agenda to move us forward and the leadership experience to deliver on it. And I'm asking for your help and support. Our campaign has a lot of momentum. We were endorsed by the two biggest progressive statewide organizations in Massachusetts, Progressive Mass and Progressive Dems of Mass, by supermajority votes. We have the support of many progressive Democratic legislators with more to come. One of the MBTA unions endorsed us, the biggest state employee union endorsed us. We have thousands of Democratic activists and supporters all across this state. We've got a strong grassroots campaign, and I'm hoping you will join it, because with your help, I know we will take back the governor's office. We will make Massachusetts a leader again, and we will make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Bob Massie from Somerville. I'm running for governor because when I look around at the state, I see deep structural problems. These are not problems that lend themselves to an additional money in the budget necessarily, or to a new program, but these are problems in our economy which is fundamentally upside down. What I mean by that is that the very basic building blocks of liberty, which Franklin Roosevelt talked about many years ago, which is the ability to have a home, a school, a doctor, and a job. Those things are all becoming harder for people all over the state, especially in central and western Mass. And I believe those need to be dealt with structural solutions. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that, for example, in housing, we need to look at new forms of ownership, new forms of financing, co-housing, land trusts, mechanisms that allow people to build equity. Right now, we are suffering from a significant wage and wealth gap Wages are simply not high enough for most people to live, and people cannot build up the money or the wealth so that they can own a home or a small business or the things that create ownership and wealth over time. In school, we see the legislature and the state backing away from our commitment to schools slowly over time, but that has led to serious problems, K through 12, and in our higher education. I want to redo our approach, rethink our approach to K through 12 school and fund higher education, fully fund K through 12 as well, because this is a commitment that we made in the 19th century as Massachusetts, and we are not maintaining it. It is critical to the future of our economy. On medicine and medical care, people are not able to afford their deductibles, they're not able to afford their premiums. I have supported single payer for more than 40 years and have fought for it. I think this is one of the differences between my colleague and I, is that I have been committed to many of these deep, progressive economic justice and racial justice issues for my entire adult life. I favor single payer. I believe that in order to achieve single payer, we're going to need to have movement strength, building that. It's not going to be a technical solution, it's got to be a political solution. And just to wrap up very quickly, I believe we need to provide much more support and local investment for jobs. I used to run something called the New Economy Coalition. We need to move to 100% renewable energy. We need to be ready for climate change. We need to have a statewide, modern, state-of-the-art transportation system, which will require 10 years. And we need to be ready for the challenges of the 21st century economy, which include artificial intelligence that is robbing us of jobs. So I believe that I am a strong progressive, willing to combat corporate power, willing to fight against economic injustice, and I think that that's exactly what will win the race against Charlie Baker. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to start. Thank you both for staying under the 3-minute mark. It was very good, actually. And so we do have a timer going, and we'll just give a raise of a hand if you're getting close to that time. So you'll know to wrap it up. I'm going to start with education. I think for a lot of us in this room, we live out in the Berkshires in a rural community, and a lot of the conversations we're having around the governor's debates is that it seems like the conversation is focused on a Boston topic. And for us, our problems are very different than Boston's problems. So how would you propose to make Chapter 70 funding for schools more equitable across the state, especially to rural areas such as the Berkshires? If Bob Massie would like to start.
Well, first of all, I support the findings of the commission on Chapter 70, and I think Chapter 70 after 25 years absolutely has to be rethought. I'd like to see a comprehensive rethinking of education, from 0 to 99 at this point. We're moving into an economy where we need to view our schools as assets for the entire community. One of the things that I've learned as I've traveled around Western Mass particularly is the particular challenge of regional schools and taking on, being required to take on both transportation and health costs. So when schools are trying to do something more or pay their teachers or advance a program, they get hit with the ever-increasing health insurance premiums, and that makes it very difficult to move forward. And as I understand it, the agreement to cover transportation costs as part of a regionalization of the schools has largely been abandoned. So, very specifically as governor, I want to focus on those problems. I see things as everything as fundamentally linked. That is, if we move to single payer, we lower those premiums, we lower those costs. That provides relief for schools, and then we have to have a governor who has spent enough time out here, which I believe I have, to really understand the fundamental regional inequity, the regional injustice that has been allowed to deepen over time, deepen on education, deepen on transportation, on connectivity in general. And I want to be a governor for the whole state. I have promised that as governor, I would move the governor's office for 2 days a month to a community that's traditionally overlooked or misunderstood or not getting the attention it deserves. And it's not only to put a spotlight on the challenges, but also the strengths of that community, and also to invite people who want to meet with me who may not have been outside of Beacon Hill for a long time to see the rest of the state. So that's the beginning of a holistic approach to rethinking education and education financing from the ground up.
I think the most important responsibility we have collectively through government is to ensure that every single child has access to a great public education. It's the most important thing we do together. And we are falling down on that responsibility at the state level. It is clear from the Legislative Commission report that Bob mentioned and what we're hearing out on the campaign trail. I don't know, I assume this is Bob's experience too, but I've been surprised how often all over this state I hear complaints from teachers and others who work in schools or parents about the pinch that they are feeling right now that feels very different from the way it has even in recent times, where schools are under a lot of pressure, teachers are being laid off in school districts all across this state. And the state is falling down on its constitutional obligation to provide adequate funding for every school district in the state to ensure every single child has access to a great public education. And this is a top priority of mine. I do believe we need to invest more in our public schools. I do believe we need to relook at the funding formula. I know Senator Hines got an amendment to the Senate budget this past week to provide additional funding for rural districts to address the need that you described, Councilor. But we need a holistic, systemic solution to this so that no district in this state, whether they're 3 minutes from New York or 3 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean, is wanting of the funding they need to properly educate children. There are lots of other things I think we need to be doing to improve our public education system, but first and foremost, we need to make sure it has the resources that they need to educate our kids. I want to also just hit on the point that was underlying your question about the unfair treatment and lack of proportional investment and attention to Western Massachusetts. And I hear this not only in Western Massachusetts, but Central Massachusetts and pretty much everywhere outside of the greater Boston area where people are feeling like they aren't heard and your needs aren't being addressed. I have been trying as a candidate to demonstrate my commitment to every part of this state. I have been to this part of the state countless times already as a candidate because I want you to know that I want to be the governor of the whole state and I will be the governor of the whole state. I also want to hear from you because the only way to really understand what your opportunities are and your unique challenges are is to actually engage with you. And you have a commitment from me as your governor that I will do that.
Thank you. For this one, we'll start with Jay Gonzalez. Healthcare costs currently make up about 40% of our state budget, and that number is climbing. What, as specifically as possible, would you do to help rein in those costs and to make healthcare affordable for everybody? And what would you do to try to get that plan actually accomplished?
Change our entire healthcare system. We have to go to a single payer system. I think actually, Representative, the Medicaid portion of the budget is about 40% right now. When you add in state and employee and retiree healthcare costs, it's probably 45 or even approaching 50%. When I was in charge of the state budget for Governor Patrick, Medicaid was about 32%, and total healthcare costs were under 40. 10, 20 years ago, it was a lot lower. And what's happening as a result is everything else state government does, and everything else state government needs to do, is getting crushed. Public higher education, our transportation systems, infrastructure, other infrastructure needs, like at our public higher education institutions, or broadband expansion so that people in Western Massachusetts can actually access high-speed internet, which is crazy to me that that's still not fixed. But you name it, everything else state government needs to do is getting crushed. Everything else businesses would be investing in to create more jobs isn't happening at the rate it would if not for the increasing growth of healthcare costs. Family budgets, more and more of them are getting eaten up by healthcare costs. We can't sustain the system we have. And the best way to get to a simpler system that people can actually figure out how to navigate and that is financially sustainable over time and actually provides better quality healthcare to people is to go to a single payer healthcare system. That cuts out a lot of the waste and inefficiency that is a function of the multi-payer healthcare system we have today. This is something I know about from my experience. I was chair of the board of the Health Connector for 3.5 years when we successfully implemented Massachusetts health reform, and I was CEO of a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program for almost 4 years. I know the system. I know how dysfunctional it is. I know that when we move to single payer, we need to do it thoughtfully. Single payer in and of itself is a means, it's not an end. You could do it in a way that doesn't get the outcomes we need. So we've got to be thoughtful about it, and I believe, based on my knowledge and experience in the healthcare industry, and my credibility in the healthcare industry and with other key stakeholders, or we're going to need to be a part of this process to figure out. It's not going to be Jay Gonzalez getting in a room by himself and writing a 50-page detailed plan on what our system's going to look like. This is a big deal. It's 20% of our economy. We've got to be thoughtful about it. I believe I can provide the leadership in establishing the process and the directives and making sure that we're on track to ensure that we get to a single payer system that achieves the outcomes we need, not only for state government, but for every single person in this state.
I feel very strongly about this, partly because of my own personal experience. I was born with a serious genetic illness known as hemophilia, which causes bleeding in your joints. And as a result of that, I lost the ability to walk at the age of 4, and I only gained it back at the age of 12 when my parents moved to Europe. They were writers, and they moved to Europe for work, and we lived in France. France has a commitment to national health insurance, to healthcare as a right. And as a result, I was covered as a foreign resident for the medical products that were quite expensive and hard to get. And so I got the ability to walk back. I've also been through other medical challenges, but the point is that healthcare is a right. It's part of a larger system of rights and the foundation that I was talking before: home, school, doctor, job. I think of this as much less of a technical problem and more of a political problem. And what I mean by that is that we've been trying to pass comprehensive national health insurance, or single payer, or Medicare for all, the different models, since 1948, 70 years. Harry Truman tried to bring it in, that didn't work. Teddy Kennedy tried to bring it in 1970s, that didn't work. Hillary Clinton tried to bring it in 1993, that didn't work. We are going to need a strong political movement, a movement of organizations and unions and government employees and all across this state. I don't think it's an advantage to have been a CEO of an insurance company. Insurance is, as you have acknowledged, part of the problem today, but I'm not sure you acknowledged that at the time. As I say, I'd like to know, because you actually raised the question with me, I said you had not been for single payer for a long time, and so I'd like to know when you brought that on board. But I have a rock-solid commitment to this. I believe that the pathway forward, in addition to bringing people together and balancing the powers that are going to be there, we have major providers such as the hospitals that are driving costs up and that function like big corporations, even though they're technically nonprofit. We have the pharmaceutical companies. I met a woman just the other day. She's originally from Austria. She flies back to Austria because the inhalers that she needs are over the counter. They cost $5 each. She buys 12 for $60 and comes back to the United States. Here, 1 month's supply is $50 with insurance. So we are being ripped off by the pharmaceutical companies. So this is going to be a political battle around rebalancing revenue and expenses in a comprehensive way. And I think that's something that's going to call for a governor who has the experience of bringing people together. I've done large national and international change, I have brought people together who very terribly, harshly disagreed with each other, and then we laid the foundations for moving forward. But it was always with the additional political power. And that's why I think being a movement leader, I see it, being a movement leader is equally, if not more important than somebody who has kept an eye on the budget in the past.
Can I just respond to this?
Sure, 30 seconds.
Because this is an important difference.
Yeah.
I agree between us, and as you, to the extent you agree, as we both do, that access to healthcare services, everybody having access to the healthcare services they need to be as healthy as they can be, is a human right, and everyone deserves that, and the system we have today is not accomplishing that, not even close. Then it's important that you make a thoughtful decision about who can best get us there. And I agree, it is a political problem. And it's been a political problem for decades. I do think we're in a moment in Massachusetts that is different. and where we have the possibility of actually getting this done here. There are constituencies who used to be against it, doctors, business leaders who are so sick of dealing with all these health insurance plans and the administrative nightmare of it, that I believe with the right leadership, we have an opening. Now, I'm not sure what Bob means by being a movement leader, but I have built a very strong grassroots campaign that includes endorsements from the legislative sponsor of the single-payer health care bill in the Massachusetts Senate, Jamie Eldridge, because he believes, based on my experience, I can provide the political leadership to get this done. Progressive Massachusetts endorsed me in part for that reason. Progressive Dems of Massachusetts endorsed me in part for that reason. It's not enough to say, I want it.
Thank you.
We need people who know this area and who are going to provide the leadership to actually get us there.
Thank you. So our nation has been living the devastation of the high school shootings, and it's time for us to take bold positions in our state to reduce these incidents or to avoid them happening. So if you can please tell us, in your first 100 days, what will be 3 concrete actions that you will do to support our state in this devastation of high school shootings?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 3 things. First thing we need to do is to support Maura Healey and her copycat ban. That is that we've been selling up to 10,000 assault weapons a year under the loophole that if you change them in modest ways, that you will be able to then sell them because they're no longer assault weapons. Charlie Baker has supported the NRA on this and has refused to push this forward. We need a governor who shows up at gun violence rallies, who speaks out boldly, and who supports the Attorney General in that. Number 2, we need to ban the online purchase of ammunition in large quantities, and particularly the kinds of ammunition that do the most damage, whether it is in an assault weapon or in a pistol form. We need to limit and ultimately end the sale of assault weapons, and I would say semi-automatic weapons, made in some cases here in Massachusetts, because these are in many cases weapons of war that have no place in domestic or civilian use. And then we need to continue to pressure the NRA to back off, or we need to pressure elected representatives who follow the NRA's position too closely. This has been an act of continuous pressure from the NRA to terrify elected officials into preventing them from taking common sense rules. Now, we're lucky in Massachusetts that we've had a substantial leadership on this question, but we could do better, and the only way we're going to do better is with a governor who does not pander to the NRA.
3 things. 1, we need to get this legislation passed that looks like it's close to the finish line and have a governor that we know would sign it and actually provide leadership on it. The extreme risk protective order legislation, or so-called red flag, which would basically ensure judges have the ability to take guns away from people who are deemed a risk to themselves or to others. Second, there are still some loopholes we could close in Massachusetts gun laws. Private sellers of guns in Massachusetts that are required to do background checks don't have the capacity to do so. There is proposed legislation that would require them to go to certified sellers of guns to basically tap them to be able to do background checks for people they're selling to. That's something I support. And lastly, after learning that the assault weapon used in Parkland was made right down the road in Springfield, I proposed banning the manufacture of assault weapons in Massachusetts. You can't buy them here. You shouldn't be able to make them here. In the absence of the federal government doing what it needs to be doing, because it's under the stranglehold of the NRA, to ban assault weapons across this country, we need to do everything we possibly can here in Massachusetts. And we don't have that kind of leadership right now. I don't know if you know, but Charlie Baker has taken no position on this extreme risk protective order legislation, no leadership at all on it. He appointed the head of the local NRA to be the head of his Department of Fish and Game. And apparently the guy started putting NRA stuff up on the state's website. Charlie Baker apparently committed to the CEO of a gun silencer company who gave a bunch of money to the national governors, to the Republican Governors Association, and he committed to this person that if legislation pending in Massachusetts to weaken our gun laws by lifting the ban on gun silencers were to reach his desk, he would sign it and weaken our gun laws. He is not a leader on this issue. Not a leader at all. And this is a public health crisis around this country. And people say, you know, we're grateful here. We have the strongest gun laws in Massachusetts and the lowest per capita death rate by gun violence. There's still over 200 people a year who are killed by gun violence in Massachusetts. We need to be doing everything we possibly can until that number is zero.
This is in the spirit of creatively solving this problem with Jay. I mean, I think one of the things, we focus on the horrific events that take place in schools, but it's also true that the majority of gun deaths are from suicides and from mental health problems. So I think that if we're going to solve this in a comprehensive way, we have to integrate this with our mental health plans, and that's a piece that the Extreme Risk Protective Order is not only to protect people who could be harmed by the person, but also someone who could harm themselves. So that's another piece of this is that it's part of the total picture of protecting women from domestic violence, because domestic violence is horrible in any situation. It becomes much more potentially fatal when you have a gun in the house. So that we need to, in addition to addressing questions of domestic violence more thoroughly and sexual harassment more thoroughly, we need to understand there's a connection to the gun problem. And then finally, the federal government has not allowed us to do research. That is, the Congress has passed limitations on research. As governor, I would invite our local universities and public health schools to do that. And I think, Jay, you agree with most of those things. So it's a complicated problem, but there are many angles that we can attack it from, so to speak.
Okay. So, as you've heard, I'm the city councilor of Pittsfield, one of the city councilors, and this year Pittsfield voted to approve the appropriation of $74 million to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant. And this doesn't include in the next couple of years the vote that we have to make for our water plant as well. This is an unfunded mandate by the EPA. And while we want to be environmental stewards and follow by the guidelines of the EPA, it lays a very heavy burden on our local taxpayers. What do you think is the state's role in helping municipalities across the state in ensuring that we can upgrade our crumbling infrastructure?
State plays a really important role. I'm assuming the way in which you're financing that project is through an organization called the I think it's now called the Clean Water Fund, formerly the State Revolving Fund. It is the state agency that helps municipalities finance water and sewer projects across the state. And it gets some money from the federal government to subsidize those, and the state provides some money to subsidize those, to provide low interest loans. In some cases, it's not enough. Our water and sewer and clean water needs, infrastructure needs across the state far exceed the capacity of the resources the state and federal government are providing right now to help cities and towns finance these projects. It is one of those infrastructure needs that doesn't get talked about enough, and because people don't feel it on a day-to-day basis like they do a broken road or a broken bridge. And it is a huge problem that I think the state needs to step up and provide additional resource for. It's an area that I know a lot about, I have experience in. Even before I worked in state government for Governor Patrick, I was a lawyer for 10 years and worked as a public finance counsel to most of the cities and towns in the state and helped them finance projects like this. I also served as general counsel, outside counsel to this organization I was just talking about, the state entity that finances water and sewer projects around the state. So I know the mechanics of it. I know what I think we need to do to provide additional resource to make sure we can help cities and towns address the backlog of projects that exist in a way that's going to allow us to accelerate addressing that backlog. But it's a huge problem, and we need to take responsibility for it.
One of the things that Massachusetts was well known for in the 19th century was our ability as a state to look into the future and to tackle big problems. And one of my concerns about the state today, and one of the reasons I'm running for governor, is I think we have lost the ability to do that in a formal and or even in a political way. So what do I mean? This governor has been governor for 3.5 years. He has no long-term plan to move us to 100% renewable energy. He has no long-term plan to deal with these, particularly the water infrastructure and other infrastructure. I've heard that it could cost us as much as $18 billion to bring our water up as comprehensively across the state. We need to, as I've talked about, transportation and other things. So instead of saying we're gonna fix it a little bit here or a little bit there, we need to look at the whole problem. In addition to Pittsfield, everywhere, there are water problems in almost every part of the state. The Cape is suffering from its own very distinctive water problems. Water is becoming scarce over time. It's a fundamental issue of sustainability, which is an area that I've led in. I've also worked on climate change for more than 25 years. I've worked on the needs, the ways in which communities need to adapt to changing environmental conditions, which have overwhelming social justice implications. And I just want to say that if we doubt that there are serious social justice problems when you fail to take on these problems, when a state fails to exercise its responsibility, look at a place like Flint, Michigan, where you suddenly end up with an entire town and all of its children being poisoned by a system that's shedding lead, and which people knew about but decided wasn't important enough to act, or it was too expensive to act. So these are the kinds of comprehensive, we can sit where we are and become increasingly a second-class state in a world that's moving forward rapidly on all of these issues. Or we can face the reality, we can have that public discussion, we can face the long-term funding consequence, and we can lay that out and have a governor who makes the case for that long-term change. Pittsfield has one particular set of problems. I can't understand why the state government was willing to give and Boston was willing to give money to GE when there's still challenges in Pittsfield that GE has not met. So I'd like to get some of that money ultimately out of GE, but that's not the way this government operates currently.
Would you like to respond?
No, I agree. We're on the same page here.
Yeah, we are.
I mean, we got a governor who, this stuff isn't even on his radar. He just accepts the status quo, the world as it is, and says he's attempting to manage it better, which he's doing a terrible job at, by the way. There's no effort to even look at what the scope of the problem is and where we need to be, and to develop a plan to act against it. It's not even that we're not making progress on these big issues. There's no, as Bob said, there's no plan to do so. There's no attempt to do so. And to me, it'd be one thing if he were trying and just not getting there. He's not even trying. It's not his view of his role. And that is a fundamental difference of opinion that I know we share. And if you elect either one of us governor, you're going to have a governor that is going to be working extremely hard with a sense of urgency to fix this stuff and to make progress on it in a way that's very different from the do-nothing, status quo, look out for your wealthy special interest friend leadership we have right now.
I have to mention, when Governor Baker announced the GE deal, there was exactly 4 representatives in the chamber who did not clap. Guess what county they were from? So we'll start with Bob Massie this time. Student loan debt.
Yeah.
The estimated student debt throughout the country is at $1.2 trillion. Mm-hmm. In Massachusetts, if you ranked each state, we rank 12th as far as the total student loan debt that our students carry compared to the other states. Obviously, that puts education out of reach for many people, and that's true as well here in rural Massachusetts, where our level of income is a little bit less, so it's harder to get our students who will go off and accumulate this debt to come back. What would you propose as governor to fight the ever-increasing student loan debt?
Well, the first thing is I'd like to have a long conversation with the legislature about the decreasing commitment over time, over the last 20 years, which has partially been forced by the lowering of our income tax rate, which has cost us about $30 billion. And so I don't necessarily blame the legislature for every piece of this, but there has been, over 20 years, a drop in funding, approximately 20% for for K through 12 and 24% for higher education. This has meant that more and more of that burden has to be shifted onto students. I used to teach at UMass Boston. I saw people, working 2 jobs, taking 5 or 6 years to get through, doing the kind of thing, Paul, actually you did, working very, very hard, taking on a very high debt, and that debt has gone up. So, number one, we have to sit down and, as I said, comprehensively talk about, do we want to remain on a track to be a second-class citizen, second-class state that does not train its students, and as you know, publicly educated students are much more likely to stay in the state, they're much more likely to contribute over the long term, and our entire system of 29 institutions is at the heart of the state economy. And we have continued to back away from that. And I have heard some heartbreaking stories. A young man who went to the University of Mass Lowell to become a civil engineer has $180,000 in debt. I mean, so he's not, and the parallel problem of this is that often it goes through a federal agency that charges too much or that allows too much to be charged. So you have this gradual shackling, the imprisonment of young people who've told me that they just don't know if they have a future. They don't know if they can ever buy a house. They don't know if they're ever going to be able to pay off their loan. They're not going to be able to start a small business. I heard one woman who got a law degree, she's $300,000 in debt. And when she's a very vibrant leader, and when she touches on this, she's on the verge of tears because she knows her future has been mortgaged. Now, that's something that we have to face as a state. And other countries have addressed this problem, and we are asking our students to go out and compete with students who have, with other workers from around the world who have zero debt, and yet, and people who can't even live in the communities where they're trying to hold jobs. So it's a comprehensive structural problem, failure of wages, failure of wealth, that needs to be addressed at a core component, giving students the ability to acquire the education for them to compete and to create prosperity for themselves. So there's no easy fix here, but continuing to back off public education, I think, is the wrong solution, both short-term and long-term for the state.
An event we just came from in Springfield that some other people here, and I know we're at, there was a young man there named Eric who I met for the first time, who was sharing with me. I'm guessing he was probably around 30 years old. He's living with his parents, trying to find a job. He's in a place where he's looking for a new job, and he's burdened with huge student loans, which are forcing him into this situation he's in. And it is a story that we hear all around the state from young people all the time. And it is a huge, there are too many young people in the state who either aren't going to get a college degree because they can't afford it, which isn't good for them and it isn't good for us. Or they're going and they are saddled with huge student loans that burden them and hold them back from being able to move forward and reach their full potential and what they deserve. And it is a huge problem. I have said that I'm committed to ensuring that every single person in this state can get access to debt-free higher education from any of our public colleges and universities. That is a commitment of mine and something I will work to ensure we get done, because at the very least, our public universities should be affordable and accessible for everybody. And right now, they are not even close. I think UMass, it's about $30,000 a year all in for 1 year for one student. Many people cannot afford that. So I think we need a program that is ambitious in this area, and it's not just important for the success and potential of each of those students who either doesn't go or is burdened. It's important for us because most of those students who graduate from our public higher education institutions stay right here in Massachusetts and are the workforce that feeds the needs of our businesses and our economic development and growth in this state, which lift all of us up. We're not only doing them a disservice, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So this is a priority. Another area where we've got a governor where I think he's got like a pilot program where 6 kids get to go, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it is not a systemic comprehensive solution to this problem. One other thing I would mention, there's a state agency, Mass Educational Financing Authority, that provides student loan financing to students in Massachusetts. I think there's more we can do with that agency to help students who have already graduated and who are already burdened by student debt, to help them restructure that debt and relieve some of that burden they feel, and that's something that I would want to explore. And this is part of a bigger structural problem, right? I mean, we're talking about economic injustice and all the things that are weighing people behind, whether it's affordable housing or wages, or paid family leave, or affordable childcare and preschool. This is one of those other prongs that needs to be addressed to help lift people up across this state.
So thank you. And speaking on the same issue with different lens, what ideas do you have to help unleash economic and job potential for renewable energy, clean, sustainable, environmentally conscious efforts?
So, Governor Patrick used to say, we could make the world our customer when it comes to the clean energy sector.
Coalition that has 200 organizations: Institute for Local Self-Reliance, Business Alliance for Living Local Economies, American Sustainable Business Council. These are groups that focus on sustainability, local business. Governor's never heard of any of these. These are successful innovations around. So hey, those have been setting us on a long-term path for transportation and renewable energy so that we know what we're trying to do over the next 10 years. I think those things would help. And attacking institutionalized racism and sexism. I think those are things that actually, as a white person, I can talk to white people about racism in perhaps a new way. And as a man, I can talk to men about sexism in a new way. At least I hope.
One of the big reasons I'm running for governor is to take on these economic justice issues and the income gap that we have in this state and in this country. And there's no one solution, right? I mean, there are a lot of things we need to do, and I'm running on a very ambitious agenda. A lot of times people ask me, what is the one or two things, most important things you're gonna do, or one or two first things you're gonna do? There aren't one or two, there are like 15, at least. And some of it is making sure we increase the minimum wage. Paid family leave is another one. Affordable childcare and preschool is probably the top priority for me, and the one I'm most passionate about, and the one that I think will impact younger families in a positive way in terms of helping them get ahead. We are the most expensive state in the country for childcare and preschool. It costs about $15,000 a year for each kid, and most families can't afford it. Aside from the fact that the evidence is really clear, it's game-changing for young kids, particularly lower-income kids, if they have access to childcare, good quality childcare and preschool in terms of their success in school and in life. It allows their parents to go to work and continue to earn income for the family. So it is the thing I think we can do that can have the biggest return on investment for kids and families that will help address this economic justice problem we have in this state. Public transportation is another one. We have one of the worst public transportation systems in the country. Lower income people in particular are dependent upon it. We have to invest in it. They need to be able to depend on it and rely on it to get to work on time. Businesses need to be able to depend on it for their workforce to be able to get here in order for them to want to do business here. Affordable housing, we have a crisis across this state, and it looks different across different parts of the state. In the Berkshires, there's an affordable housing crisis here too. As I know many in this room probably know, and we read about in particular in terms of a lot of the workforce in the Berkshires can't afford housing here. It's a similar dynamic on the Cape. The greater Boston affordable housing problem looks different. We need a strategy in each area to take on this crisis. So there are a lot of different areas where we need to make progress. Affordable health care is another one. We talked about that. In order to help relieve that pressure on lower and middle income families and help ensure that they aren't struggling to get ahead and have the ability to continue to make progress for themselves and their families and live a stable, good quality of life. And this is a crisis in this state. We've got a governor right now that is not proposing to do anything substantial in any of these areas. and it's the biggest reason I'm running for governor.
Public transportation is inadequate in most of the state, and perhaps nowhere more so than in western Massachusetts. In the Berkshires, there is no nighttime bus service, there is no Sunday service. In Greenfield, Franklin County, where I also represent, there's no weekend service at all. In my town, there's no bus, never mind, any time of the day, any time of the week. What would you propose specifically for rural areas to make public transportation better for us and to get to us as well? And what kind of revenue sources, peripheral things would you propose to make that a reality? And I think we're starting with Jay.
So my number one priority will be to ensure a robust bus service in the town of Peru. This is a huge problem, and it's something that I hear about, I assume Bob hears about everywhere in this state. And the issue I probably hear the most about is the inadequacy of the public transportation system. For western Massachusetts in particular, again, the problem looks different than in different parts of the state, and we need different solutions. So one challenge here is that you all are far apart. There isn't a lot of density, right? And so it makes it harder to have an efficient, effective public transit system. But we need, so in my view, we need to be doing things like making sure the systems we have in place, bus service, transit service for people with disabilities, are as robust as they can be and are supported instead of cut, which is what's happening right now under the current government. You absolutely should have weekend service. It's not like stuff stops on the weekends in the Berkshires. Your number one economic driver is tourism and the arts and culture, right? I mean, there are shows on the weekends, right? People work in those places. People work in the restaurants. The hospital's open on the weekends. People need to get from here to there. The workforce needs to get from here to there. You deserve, and as governor, I will work with you to make sure you have a service that works for you at the times you need it, and that is robust enough to support the economy and the economic needs here. Beyond that, I think we need to think with a little bit innovatively about this in terms of some of the unique challenges like the one I mentioned about the lack of density in this area. Maybe there are other solutions we need to be thinking about that government should be pursuing, more point-to-point service solutions. I don't know what they might be, leveraging new technologies that exist, ride-share technologies or others, to help better address the needs of people in this region. But that's the type of conversation I'd want to have as governor with local leaders and representatives for the Berkshires, is what makes sense for you? And how can state government be a true partner in collaborating with you to address this fundamental responsibility of government in a way that's going to serve the people of this region and the economy of this region as effectively as possible. One of the reasons I support the so-called millionaires tax is because we need to invest more in our public transportation system and in the roads and bridges across this state, which have been starved for revenue and investment for way too long. So I will advocate for additional revenue for these purposes, and I will be a partner in working with you to figure out how to address the unique challenges in public transportation in this part of the state.
A couple of weeks ago, I went to Worcester because there was a protest organized by people who ride the bus and by the unions and so forth because of the cut in the Regional Transit Authority budget for Worcester. And this is, of course, happening out here, and it's happening all over the state. And as I understand it, you know, out of $88 million, the governor's proposing to cut $8 million. And what I really was struck by is how the governor does not seem to understand the human consequences of this. So I was meeting with people who are homeless or almost homeless. This is their lifeline to get to services, to try to find a job, to be able to shop, to be able to move their kids or to go to the doctor or whatever. I talked to one woman in a wheelchair. All she's got is the wheelchair and the bus because the ride doesn't function well for her. So they were looking at the cutting of bus lines meaning essentially the denial of their ability to live. And that consequence for a relatively small amount of money, that is $8 million, as part of a total pattern of cutting back on transportation, is harming the people who most need the support and services, and that is a pattern. So, as governor, there's the short-term issues of solving those regional transit authority funding problems and giving them the priority they deserve. In the longer term, we need to decide, as I've said more than once, are we gonna settle back and coast on whatever our ancestors did and previous generations did, or are we gonna embrace the future and set us up? Now let me give you some quick examples. The Japanese have bullet trains that travel around Japan at 160 miles an hour, and they have been there for 15 or 20 years. It's about 95 miles from Springfield to Boston. You can do that in about 40 minutes on a high-speed train. And it should go all the way to Albany and should be part of a comprehensive system that integrates the North Shore and the South Shore and North-South Rail Link and East-West and the Berkshire Flyer and the Housatonic Flyer, all the different proposals, but it needs to be built out in a much more comprehensive way. The Chinese have 12,000 miles of high-speed rail. The United States has 0. So in a game where you have a score of 12,000 to 0, who's ahead? So this is a serious problem that we have not addressed. And this is, I'll tell you honestly, one of the reasons I find Governor Baker's failure so outrageous. Because at the very moment when we have a relatively prosperous economy at the top, when we are generating, if anybody's been to Boston, you see 100 buildings going up a week. At that very moment, when we should be investing in transportation, investing in the systems that will allow for prosperity in the future, we are not doing that. In fact, Charlie Dicker's like a guy who says, I'm so proud, I haven't spent a dime on my house. Yes, it's leaking, it's falling apart, it's peeling, the basement's flooded, but listen, I'm a great manager because I haven't spent a penny on it. That's not the way a business person thinks, that's not the way a leader thinks, and that's something that I want to correct.
Let's start with Mr. Gonzalez. So, do you believe in safe staffing, and would you support the Safe Staffing Ballot Initiative?
I do support it. The fact that we're at this point where we're relying on this blunt instrument of a ballot question to ensure that our hospitals are properly staffing nurses in different units of the hospitals is a symptom of our broken healthcare system, in my view. And where, the economies of our healthcare system function as if it's a functioning market. It is not a functioning market. It has none of the attributes of a functioning market. We need to recognize it and deal with it accordingly. In the short term, I think this is exactly the kind of thing we need to do in order to ensure that we've got the right staffing levels in our hospitals. But the real solution here is to change our system entirely, which is why I'm supporting single-payer system. I know we talked about that at length before, but we have fundamental problems and dysfunctions in our healthcare system. This is one of those symptoms that I think the ballot question will help address. But at the end of the day, we need a system where the payer of that system is working for us, and has our interests at heart, and will ensure that it is funding a healthcare system that is attending to our needs in a responsible and effective way. And that is not what we have with the healthcare system we have today. I want to give you one example, go back to why single payer is so important and how we can do it in a way. A lot of people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? It actually will save us money if we do it thoughtfully. One example, I was very proud at my health insurance company of all the ways in which we helped our members coordinate care and get access to the care they needed. But most of what we did was facilitate a bunch of useless, valueless transactions. We had a whole team of people that would go out to every doctor and hospital and negotiate contracts with everyone, paying them different amounts for different services than other health insurance plans did, making them do different things than other health insurance plans did. We'd have a whole team of people that would take all those contracts, put them in our IT system so we paid all the bills correctly. We inevitably screw some of that up, so we have a whole team of people that would deal with all the screw-ups. Every health plan has all these teams of people, and every hospital and doctor has teams of people to deal with all these teams of people. It's ridiculous and counterproductive. I read that Toronto General Hospital has 4 billing people and Mass General has 450. Makes you wonder why they can't properly staff nurses, right? So this is a systemic problem. And there's a ton of waste and inefficiency that actually results in worse healthcare than if we had one payer representing us that was driving the healthcare system in one direction to improve the quality of care and make sure everybody had access to the services they need. That's what I'm going to provide as governor.
To the question, I absolutely and strongly support this provision. I mentioned that I've had my own healthcare challenges. In addition to the hemophilia that I had as a child, I got HIV from these blood products. That was, I saw up close how nurses and medical professionals took care of people with HIV during a very scary time in our national life. Turned out that I had a genetic resistance to HIV, so I did not advanced to AIDS, but I had a lot of friends who died. And also then I got hepatitis, and I had to have a liver transplant. I want to tell you now I'm in excellent health. The liver transplant cured the cirrhosis, cured the hepatitis, even cured the hemophilia. But during that period, and as I say to every nurse I meet, nurses are what pulled me through, the people who pulled me through. The wonderful doctors, wonderful surgeons, but the nurses were by the bedside. They took care of me. They took care of me in the middle of the night. And I would be the strongest possible governor on behalf of nurses and medical professionals in the history of the state. I also have benefited when I have been, for various medical reasons, moved on floors which had lower staffing. In other words, there were there was more nurses per patient. And I can tell you that helps healing. You get treatment right away. You're not sitting, you're not in pain, you're not waiting for treatment. But I want to come back to extend this conversation because Jay said something important about that markets don't work here. I mean, insurance is designed to maximize return by excluding people who need care. That's the model of insurance. And Jay, this is a sincere question. You ran a for-profit health insurance company which was built on the idea that markets could work. And now you're suggesting that you don't believe markets can work. At what point, and that you're for single payer. Did you, it's not an honest question, did you speak out about single payer when you were running this company? I just don't see how you made that shift from being someone who is a leader of a market organization to now someone who says, well, now I realize that it doesn't work anymore. So obviously for the time that you were there, you supported that model, or not?
I have for as long as I can remember, so not for 40 years like you, because I was 7 40 years ago. But for as long as I have been knowledgeable about the healthcare industry, anybody who knows me, who I've talked to about this, would know that I've personally always believed that our system is crazy and that we need to go to a single-payer healthcare system. When I worked for Governor Patrick, the healthcare reform in Massachusetts had just passed, and his position was we were going to work to implement Massachusetts healthcare reform, and so my charge was to do that. When I left the Patrick administration, I had spent a lot of time on healthcare issues as chair of the board of the Health Connector, and didn't want to go back to being a lawyer, and there's a lot of very interesting stuff happening in healthcare. And I had the opportunity to go run a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program. And it was that mission that appealed to me. And in the context of a system and a structure that I didn't agree with, it was a way for me to plug in and hopefully make a difference for the low-income people who we covered. And we did. And I'm very proud of my record working within that system to get better outcomes for our members, which we did. We got a lot of value for them in terms of reducing inpatient hospital admissions and emergency department visits and connecting our members to care. Our company was named one of 46 game-changing companies in Massachusetts for the innovative work we did on the opioid epidemic of any company in any industry. I'm very proud of what we did. It doesn't mean I believe the system was the right system, which is why I'm running for governor, to change the system. And I think that experience positions me extremely well to provide the leadership to do it.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Please, up to a minute, please.
Just help me understand, what was the business model? I don't mean this as a challenge as much as what was the business model for CAIR? How did it make money?
We made money by providing value to the state and lowering healthcare costs, which we did by keeping our members healthy. That was our model. We had a whole team. The biggest staff we had was nurses who would connect people to the care they needed and help coordinate care. The problem is every health plan has that. You don't need to provide that service at the health plan level. It should be done at the provider level, at the doctor and hospital level, which is the direction the industry's going, but it's always historically been done at the health insurance plan. And so while we were there, we did things to strengthen that model. We were the first health insurance plan in the state to integrate physical healthcare nurses with behavioral healthcare nurses. Integrated care management provides much better outcomes for people. People's mental health problems shouldn't be handled differently from their physical health problems, and we won a national award for that work and that model of care. So I'm very proud of what we did. It doesn't mean I think the system is the right system.
Would you like another minute?
Well, I mean, some of this is between, I am skeptical, like the argument, for example, around privatization is, don't worry, we can find gains and efficiencies and still earn a profit and still run less, that have a lower cost for government. A lot of that times, those models just don't work. I mean, privatization ends up hammering wages. So when I hear about something, and just generally, when I hear about something where the solution is to create greater efficiencies and still build in a profit margin and still charge, I'm always curious, that's like magic. And I do believe there is some element here, but I also wonder about, did you also restrict the kind of care that people could get? In other words, how did you manage? When you talk about managing care, sometimes that means people can only get so much care, or they can only go to certain doctors, or
I'm happy to spend more time
Yeah, maybe
explaining
it's not
to you
for us,
how
but
health
I do
insurance
have-
companies work and how
No,
the
I
healthcare
understand.
industry works in this
No,
area.
Jay.
But we agree, Bob, that the system doesn't work the way it should, and we need to reform it. And I resent the implication that because I worked in the industry, it somehow means I can't be trusted to change it, or that my desire to do so or belief to do so isn't informed or isn't sincere. It is, and we need to. And I'm very proud of my record and what we did and what we accomplished for people who really needed our help.
Thank you both for a respectful back and forth. That was informative. Thank you.
So I guess in a little bit of time, we're running out of time here, and we do want you both to have closing statements and for Tahirah to also make a closing statement. But so really quickly, in 1 minute or less, I guess, we hear a lot about your responses to questions, and for the average voter, I would say that it's hard to differentiate what the differences between you two. And I'm sure both of you know that going up against Governor Baker is not going to be an easy feat. He is wildly popular, and he has a lot of money in the bank. So for us as Democrats to rally behind one candidate, how would you differentiate yourselves from each other?
So let me start. I was going to say this before I started being interrogated. When Bob told his personal health story, I just want to acknowledge, I think probably on behalf of everybody in this room, it is an incredible story. And very grateful that it worked out the way it did with all the different challenges you faced, and says something about you. Our differences. I think the biggest difference is less about where we stand on issues, as far as I can tell. We've been spending a lot of time together talking about where we stand on issues. There are more similarities than differences, for sure. We're both advocating for a very ambitious progressive agenda. I think my experience best positions me to deliver on it. I'm the only one who's worked in state government in a leadership position as Governor Patrick's Secretary of Administration and Finance, where I not only oversaw the state budget and other stuff within my realm, I often was asked by the governor to be his point person for negotiating a lot of the big things we got through the legislature during that time. And so I've been there. I know how the process works. I've worked successfully through it. And it isn't, being the governor isn't being a dictator. You need to work collaboratively with the legislature and other key stakeholders and figure out how to build that progress and momentum and sense of urgency while listening and understanding all the different interests that exist and figuring out if this is where you're trying to go, what is that path that gets us as close to that place as possible. And it's not going to matter what we all want to do, all the big areas we want to make progress in, unless we actually do it. And I think because of my experience, I'm going to be in a position to hit the ground running on day one. And I think that is a big reason why a lot of these the grassroots progressive organizations around the state who care deeply about actually delivering on this agenda, and a lot of the legislators and others are supporting my campaign.
I also respect Jay's experience and his commitment. And I'm at somewhat of a disadvantage because it's quite easy for people to understand, hey, I used to do the same job. Charlie Baker was A&F director, I'm A&F director. Charlie Baker was head of a healthcare company, I was head of a healthcare company. I don't actually think that's an exciting parallel, but I acknowledge that it is a parallel. What I have done is harder to explain, but I have made national and international system change. What do I mean by that? I ran an organization called Series, which brought together some of the largest pension funds in the country with activists to go together to push America's biggest companies forward on issues of climate and women's rights, labor rights across. I was the person who thought of and then implemented an entirely new system of accounting around sustainability that's used by 11,000 multinational companies, required by many governments and stock exchanges. I thought of it, I organized it, I brought people together, I had no legal authority, but I was able to make that change. I am actually winning a major international prize in June for that success, but it's hard to communicate. I founded the Investor Network on Climate Risk, which brought together the biggest pension funds in the world and many others to meet at the UN every 2 years. I understand the global economy. I understand Massachusetts' role in the global economy. I understand where we are headed. It's true, I'm not someone from Beacon Hill. I don't understand, I have not the same level of experience with every detailed budget. I don't think that's what's needed here. I think what's needed is somebody who understands the need for justice, economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, regional justice, and who, even though I look a little bit like a short retired investment banker, I burn with the desire for justice. And I believe that's something that people want. I think it's something that will help me beat Charlie Baker, not by myself, but together. I also have a very large group of supporters. We managed to get 20,000 signatures for our signature process. So I believe I am a different beast. I come from a different background. And in fact, many of the positions that we now share, I've held for a long time, and Jay has adopted relatively recently. So, well, Jay, you weren't saying anything about climate change at the beginning of this.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for this rich conversation this afternoon, and I want to allow each one of you 2 minutes to up to 2 minutes to do your closing remarks and say where you wish to say that haven't been said yet. Starting with Mr. Gonzalez.
So thank you for hosting this forum, and to the moderators and everybody for being here, and to Bob for the conversation. You know, I'm asking for your support. I think you've got 2 great candidates here, in my view. I think you get 2 candidates who are both equally passionate about the progress we need to make on economic justice issues and in lots of other areas. I would argue, as I mentioned, that I'm best positioned to not only provide that leadership, but also the experience to deliver on that ambitious agenda. I want to get back to the point that the counselor mentioned, that Charlie Baker is going to be tough to beat. He's so popular, he has so much money, he's really tall. Like, how can you possibly do that? But here's the thing. If you actually ask people who say they're fine with Charlie Baker, they like Charlie Baker, why do you like him? The answer is never, he's really doing a good job at fixing our transportation system or making progress on some other area. It's usually something like he seems nice, and I'm really glad he isn't a crazy Republican like exists in other parts of the country. Aren't we so lucky? Well, the measure of whether our governor's doing a good job shouldn't be that he's nice and isn't crazy. Right? We face lots of big challenges we need to make progress on. We've been talking about many of them today. And it's one thing for someone to be asked, how do you feel about Charlie Baker? You can say, oh, he's fine. Which is what the polling shows. No one is passionate about Charlie Baker. In fact, the most recent poll asked people for the first time, do you think he's doing a good job on a whole series of issues? Not one issue where a majority of people think he's doing a good job. Not one. It's a different thing to be asked who you're going to vote for. Elections are about choices. And in this case, it's going to be a choice between a governor who's done nothing to make a difference in people's lives, not standing up for people, versus someone who desperately wants to do so and has the experience to deliver on it. And I think people are going to choose that as long as they're informed about the choice, which is why we need your help, knocking on doors, making calls, putting bumper stickers on your car, doing whatever you can to make sure people are informed about the choice. And if you do, we will win this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, Jay. I appreciate the conversation we had today, and even if it sometimes has a little bit of an edge to it, it's really meant so that we understand and clarify on these questions. There are two issues here. One is who can establish a vision of the future that will be strong enough to beat Charlie Baker, to bring us together and beat Charlie Baker, and then second, who can do the job. I believe that what's called for today is for all of us and for the whole country to reaffirm the core values of the United States. Those are values of inclusion, they're values of equality, they're values of justice. We pledge liberty and justice for all. It is part of all of our major documents. And it breaks my heart when I look around this state and around this country and I see how many lives are wasted, how many communities are being wrecked, how many parts of our planet are being destroyed because we have a system that is fundamentally unfair and we have a government that is unwilling to do anything about it. In the case of Donald Trump, his sins, so to speak, his failures are failures of action. In the case of Charlie Baker, they're failures of inaction. What he doesn't say, where he didn't come to the Women's March or the Climate March or the Gun Violence March. He stays silent when Donald Trump says offensive things and attacks people. So as governor, I want to stand up to him, and I want to restore our confidence. I want to work with all of us to restore our confidence in the core values that have established who we are as citizens of Massachusetts, as members of the Democratic Party, and as Americans. And I think this race is more than who can manage the government. I think it is who can lay out a comprehensive, exciting vision that people embrace. I like to inspire people. I like to then push when necessary and require when it's absolutely required. I believe I have that toolkit. I believe I have the experience, the right kind of experience to make this change. And I ask you to support me and work with me so that one of us is going to win, and then I ask you to support that nominee so that we can beat Baker and return Massachusetts to its core values. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, wasn't that a great forum? Give everybody a round of applause. And while we're doing that, let me just introduce you to our organizers and partners today. So we have behind the camera up here in the white shirt, we have Solomon Steen, who's done so much of the legwork and a great job. So I'm going to ask you to give him a round of applause. And some of our most important community partners, Our Revolution Massachusetts, Our Revolution Cambridge, Restaurant Opportunity Center of Boston, NASW Massachusetts Chapter, CAIR Massachusetts, Mass Equality, NAACP-Berkshire County Branch, 350 MA Berkshire Node, Amplify Latinx, Violence in Boston, Inc., and Indivisible Pittsfield events. Thank you all for your partnership and for your participation today. Thank you to the candidates and our wonderful moderators.